The silence hit Commander Sarah Chen like a physical blow as she stepped off the transport shuttle. The landing pad should have been crawling with activity, but instead only empty metal stretched before her, under the pale light of Kepler. 2Bs, twin suns. Her boots echoed against the composite flooring as she moved toward what remained of forward operating base Meridian. Control, this is backup Team Alpha. She spoke into her comm unit, her voice steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. We've touched down at FOB Meridian. Initial visual confirms no friendly personnel at the landing zone. Static crackled back for several seconds before a response came through. Copy, Alpha. Proceed with mission parameters. Search and rescue remains priority 1. Chen adjusted her rifle strap and signaled to the 12 soldiers behind her. They moved in practiced formation across the eerily quiet base, their enhanced combat suits automatically adjusting to the planet's atmosphere. The twin suns cast strange double shadows that seemed to dance and shift as they advanced. The base had been humanity's foothold in the Vega sector for 3 years. Home to 800 Marines, scientists, and support personnel, it served as both research station and military outpost on the frontier of human expansion. When communications went dark 48 hours ago, Command had assumed equipment failure. Solar storms were common in this system, but as Chen's team reached the main compound, it became clear this was no technical malfunction. Scorch marks scarred the walls of the primary habitat domes. Blast craters pocked the ground, where defensive positions had been overrun. The acrid smell of melted plasteel, and something far worse, hung in the recycled air. Through her suit's filters, Chen caught the unmistakable, metallic tang of blood. Sweep and clear, she ordered quietly. Watch for IEDs, and assume hostile presence, until proven otherwise. The team spread out, moving through the abandoned corridors with weapons raised. Emergency lighting cast everything in a hellish red glow. Chen had seen battlefields before, but something about the absolute stillness here unsettled her more than any firefight. They found the first bodies in the communications center. 3 technicians lay slumped over their consoles, their bodies twisted at impossible angles. No blast wounds, no projectile damage. Their necks had been snapped with surgical precision. Chen knelt beside the nearest corpse, noting the way the man's head sat at nearly 90 degrees to his shoulders. "Sir," called out Sergeant Martinez from across the room. "You need to see this." Chen moved to where Martinez stood before the main communication array. The equipment had been systematically destroyed, but not by explosives or energy weapons. Deep claw marks scored the metal surfaces. Whatever had done this possessed incredible strength and razor-sharp talons capable of shredding reinforced titanium alloy. "What the hell did this?" whispered Private Kowalski, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. Chen studied the damage patterns. The claw marks were too large to belong to any known Earth predator, and intelligence reports had indicated no dangerous wildlife on Kepler 442b. The native ecosystem consisted primarily of simple plant analogs and small scavenger creatures no larger than rats. "Keep moving," Chen ordered. "Document everything but don't touch anything unless absolutely necessary." They progressed deeper into the facility, finding similar scenes of carnage in every section. The cafeteria held 27 bodies arranged in neat rows, their throats torn out with clinical efficiency. The medical bay showed signs of a desperate last stand, with barricaded doors and improvised weapons scattered about. But even there, the defenders had been overwhelmed by something that killed without sound or fury, just methodical, brutal precision. In the armory, they discovered something even more disturbing. The weapons lockers stood open and empty, their electronic locks intact and undamaged. No signs of forced entry. No evidence of explosives or cutting tools. Someone or something had accessed the weapons cache using proper authorization codes. "Chen to control," she radioed, her voice carefully controlled. "We have multiple KIA. Estimated 700+ casualties. Base appears to have been overrun by unknown hostiles. Recommend immediate reinforcement and full tactical assessment." The response came back laden with static. "Copy, Alpha. Can you identify the nature of the threat?" Chen looked around at the systematically destroyed facility, at the precise brutality of the kills, at the technological sophistication required to breach their security systems. Negative. Control. Whatever hit this place, it's nothing in our threat database. As they moved toward the residential sections, the team's nerves began to fray. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the hum of life support systems and their own breathing. Every shadow might conceal an enemy. Every corner could hide death. The residential quarters told the most heartbreaking story of all. Families had died together, parents shielding children who had been killed anyway. The attackers had shown no mercy, no discrimination between military and civilian targets. Even the base's small school had been hit, tiny desks overturned and scattered with the remains of lesson plans that would never be completed. Private Jackson, barely 19 and on his first deployment, vomited into his helmet's waste system after discovering a nursery filled with cribs that would never again hold sleeping babies. Chen put a hand on his shoulder, feeling the tremor that ran through the young man's frame. "Stay focused, Jackson," she said quietly. "We owe it to these people to find out what happened here." In the command center, they found Colonel Williams, the base commander, slumped over his desk. His sidearm lay beside his hand, unfired. His computer terminal still glowed, displaying his final log entry. Day 1247, 1400 hours. Long-range sensors have detected multiple contacts approaching from the outer system. Configuration unknown, but they're moving too fast to be natural phenomena. I've ordered general quarters and attempted to contact the fleet, but something's jamming our communications. Whatever's coming, it's not showing up on any of our identification protocols. Williams out. The timestamp showed the entry had been made 73 hours ago, just 1 hour before all communication with the base ceased. Chen scrolled through the sensor logs, finding increasingly frantic entries as unknown contacts closed on the planet. The final automated entries showed dozens of craft entering the atmosphere, their energy signatures unlike anything in human databases. Then, abruptly, all records stopped. "Sir, movement in Section C," reported Corporal Davies over the comm. "Thermal imaging shows a single large contact. Approximately humanoid but bigger than baseline human." Chen's blood went cold. After hours of searching through silent death, they had finally found something alive. All teams converge on Section C. Approach with extreme caution and maintain overwatch positions. The team regrouped in the corridor leading to the base's secondary laboratory complex. Through the reinforced windows, they could see banks of scientific equipment, most of it dark and damaged. But there, moving among the wreckage with purposeful intent, was a figure that made Chen's breath catch in her throat. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, its body covered in what appeared to be some form of adaptive armor that shifted color to match its surroundings. The creature's limbs were elongated and predatory, ending in the razor-sharp claws they had seen evidence of throughout the base. Its head was elongated and angular, with multiple eyes that glowed with an eerie blue-white light. But what truly chilled Chen was the intelligence in those alien eyes, and the way the creature manipulated the laboratory equipment with careful, deliberate movements. This was no mindless beast driven by hunger or territorial instinct. This was a thinking, reasoning being that had methodically slaughtered hundreds of human beings. The creature's head suddenly snapped up, those glowing eyes focusing directly on Chen through the window. For a moment, Predator and Soldier stared at each other across the barrier of reinforced glass. Then the alien's mouth opened in what might have been a smile, revealing rows of serrated teeth. It raised one clawed hand and placed it against the glass. Where it touched, the material began to smoke and dissolve. "Fall back!" Chen screamed, but it was too late. The creature burst through the dissolving window with inhuman speed, moving faster than anything that large had a right to move. Its claws swept through the air where Chen had been standing a heartbeat before, carving deep grooves in the metal wall behind her. The team opened fire, their pulse rifles sending streams of coherent energy into the alien's center mass. The shots struck home, but the creature's armor absorbed the impact with only slight discoloration. It moved through the barrage like a dancer, flowing around their fire with impossible grace. Sergeant Martinez was the first to die. The creature's claws opened his throat before he could trigger a second burst. Private Chen tried to fall back but stumbled, and those terrible talons punched through his chest armor like it was made of paper. "Grenades," Chen shouted, pulling a plasma charge from her belt. "Bring the whole section down if you have to." But even as her remaining soldiers followed her order, Chen realized they were fighting something beyond their understanding. This creature wasn't just physically superior to humans, it was strategically brilliant, technologically advanced, and utterly without mercy. The plasma explosions lit up the corridor like miniature suns, filling the air with superheated gas and shrapnel. When the smoke cleared, the alien was gone. Only the bodies of her soldiers remained, along with deep scratches in the floor showing which direction their killer had taken. Chen looked at her decimated team. Of the 12 who had entered the base with her, only 4 remained. The alien had killed 8 trained soldiers in less than 2 minutes, and she suspected it had only retreated because it chose to. Not because they had forced it back. "Control, this is Alpha," she radioed, her voice hoarse from shouting orders. "We have confirmed hostile contact. Repeat. Confirmed hostile contact. Unknown alien species. Highly advanced. Extremely dangerous. Request immediate evacuation and orbital bombardment authorization." The response was immediate and chilling. "Negative on evac, Alpha. Mission parameters have changed. You are to maintain position and gather intelligence on the hostile threat. Fleet Command needs to know what we're dealing with before additional forces engage." Chen stared at the comm unit in disbelief. They were being ordered to remain on a planet where hundreds of humans had been slaughtered by creatures that could tear through their best soldiers like tissue paper. "Sir, with respect, we're not equipped for this mission," she replied. "The hostiles possess superior technology and physical capabilities. My team cannot." "Alpha, your orders are clear," Control interrupted. "Maintain position and gather intelligence. Additional support is en route, ETA 6 hours. Control out." The comm went silent, leaving Chen and her 3 remaining soldiers alone in a facility that had become a tomb. Somewhere in the darkness, an alien killer moved with perfect silence, and they had been ordered to hunt it down with weapons that had proven useless against its defenses. Chen looked at the faces of her soldiers. Jackson, pale but determined. Davies, checking his rifle with mechanical precision. Kowalski, whose hands shook slightly as he reloaded his magazines. They were good soldiers, but they were also human. And on this world, humanity had already lost the first round. "All right, people," Chen said, forcing confidence into her voice. "We have 6 hours until backup arrives. Our mission is to stay alive and learn everything we can about these creatures. We're going to move smart, stay together, and make every shot count." She paused, looking around at the devastation that surrounded them. "And if we don't make it out of here, we're going to make damn sure the next human force to arrive knows exactly what they're facing." In the distance, something howled in a voice that held intelligence and malice in equal measure. The sound echoed through the empty corridors like a promise of death, and Chen knew their real fight was just beginning. The maintenance tunnels beneath Forward Operating Base Meridian had never been designed for combat operations, but they offered the only concealment Chen's team could find. The cramped space forced them to move single file, their breathing apparatus filtering the stale air as they crept through the mechanical bowels of the facility. 6 hours had passed since their initial encounter with the alien creature, and backup was still 3 hours out. In that time, they had learned more about their enemy than Chen had ever wanted to know. The creatures hunted in packs. They had discovered this when Davies' motion sensors picked up multiple heat signatures moving through the upper levels with coordinated precision. At least 4 distinct contacts, possibly more, sweeping the facility in search patterns that demonstrated tactical sophistication, Chen found deeply unsettling. "They're smart," whispered Jackson, his voice barely audible through the comm system. "Look at those movement patterns. They're not just hunting us, they're hurting us." Chen studied the tactical display on her wrist computer, watching the red dots that represented their enemies slowly constricting their search area. Jackson was right. The aliens weren't randomly searching the base. They were systematically cutting off escape routes and forcing Chen's team deeper underground. "Sir," Davies called softly from his position at the tunnel junction ahead. I'm seeing something you need to look at. Chen crawled forward through the narrow passage until she reached Davy's position. He had removed an access panel in the tunnel wall, exposing a tangle of fiber optic cables and power conduits. But it was what lay beyond the cables that made Chen's blood run cold. A secondary tunnel ran parallel to theirs, and it was filled with organic material. Thick, rope-like tendrils covered the walls and ceiling, pulsing with a faint bioluminescent glow. The structures looked almost like nervous system tissue, or perhaps some form of living circuitry. They're not just occupying our base, Davies said quietly. They're converting it. Chen extended a small probe through the access panel, her suit's sensors analyzing the alien growth. The readings were unlike anything in human databases. The material showed characteristics of both biological tissue and advanced nanotechnology, somehow bridging the gap between living organism and machine. It's interfacing with our systems, she realized with growing horror. They're not just stealing our technology, they're integrating with it. This explained how the aliens had accessed the base's security systems without leaving evidence of forced entry. They weren't breaking the codes, they were literally merging with the electronic infrastructure and taking control from within. A soft scratching sound from deeper in the tunnel made all 4 soldiers freeze. Something was moving through the alien-modified passages, and it was getting closer. Chen made rapid hand signals, ordering her team to fall back toward the junction they had passed 10 minutes earlier. But as they began to move, Davy's sensors lit up with new contacts. The creatures above had found another access point, and were now descending into the tunnel system. "We're boxed in," Kowalski whispered, his voice tight with controlled panic. Chen looked at her options and found them severely limited. Forward meant moving deeper into alien-controlled territory. Backward meant walking into a trap. Up meant facing creatures that had already proven capable of tearing through powered armor like paper. She made the only choice available: emergency ascent. Section 7 maintenance access. Move fast and stay tight. The team scrambled up through a narrow vertical shaft that led to the base's water processing plant. The facility had been one of the few areas they hadn't thoroughly searched, mainly because the massive recycling tanks and filtration systems created a maze of hiding places perfect for ambush. They emerged into a chamber filled with enormous cylindrical tanks and the constant hum of purification systems. Emergency lighting cast everything in deep red shadows, and the air carried the sharp ozone smell of electromagnetic water treatment. "Contact front! Contact front!" Jackson suddenly called out, bringing his rifle to bear on a shape moving between the tanks. But Chen held up her hand before anyone could fire. What Jackson had spotted wasn't one of the alien killers. It was human. A figure stumbled from behind a massive filtration unit. And Chen recognized the uniform of a base communications technician. The woman's left arm hung at an unnatural angle, and her face was streaked with dried blood. But she was alive. "Please," the technician gasped, her voice raw and desperate. "Please don't leave me here." Chen moved toward the woman carefully, her weapon still ready but lowered. After finding nothing but corpses for the past 6 hours, discovering a survivor felt almost too good to be true. "What's your name and rank?" Chen asked, stopping just out of arm's reach. "Technician Second Class Elena Vasquez," the woman replied. "Communications Division. I've been hiding in the water treatment system since the attack started. How did you survive when everyone else died?" Vasquez's eyes darted nervously around the chamber. "I was doing maintenance on the backup transmitter array when they hit. The systems here are heavily shielded, and I guess they couldn't detect me through all the electromagnetic interference." Chen studied the woman's injuries and demeanor. The broken arm looked genuine, and her condition was consistent with someone who had been hiding in a dangerous industrial environment for 3 days. But something about her story bothered Chen. "The backup transmitter," Chen said slowly. "Is it still functional?" "Partially." Vasquez nodded eagerly. "I've been trying to repair it, but I need help. With a full team, we might be able to get a message out." This was the first good news Chen had heard since landing. If they could restore communications, they might be able to warn the approaching backup force about what they were really facing. "Show me," Chen ordered. Vasquez led them deeper into the water processing facility. Moving through a narrow catwalk system, suspended above the massive purification tanks. The sound of churning water and humming machinery would mask their movement, but it would also cover the approach of any enemies. The backup transmitter array occupied a small chamber at the far end of the facility. Banks of communication equipment lined the walls, most of it dark but some showing the green glow of standby power. Vasquez moved to a central console and began activating systems with the practiced efficiency of an experienced technician. The primary antenna got taken out in the first wave, she explained as she worked. But the emergency array should be able to reach orbit if we can boost the power output. Chen positioned her soldiers at defensive positions while Vasquez continued her work. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to hope. If they could warn the backup force, if they could provide intelligence about the alien threat, maybe those 800 deaths wouldn't be completely meaningless. Got it, Vasquez announced. Systems online. Chen moved to the communications console, preparing to transmit their situation report. But as she reached for the microphone, she noticed something that made her blood freeze. The communications logs showed outgoing transmissions from this station. Dozens of them, sent continuously over the past 3 days. But according to Vasquez, she had been hiding and trying to repair the system. Vasquez, Chen said quietly, her hand moving toward her sidearm. Who have you been talking to? The woman's expression changed in an instant. Friendly desperation replaced by something cold and calculating. When she smiled, Chen saw rows of serrated teeth that no human being had ever possessed. I've been talking to my fleet, Vasquez said, her voice shifting into harmonics that hurt to hear. Telling them everything about human tactical capabilities, weapon systems, and defensive strategies. The backup force you're expecting, we know their exact approach vector, their troop strength, and their planned landing sites. The creature wearing Vasquez's face began to change, its human disguise melting away like a discarded mask. The broken arm straightened and elongated. Ending in razor-sharp claws, its skin shifted from pale human flesh to the adaptive armor Chen had seen before. You've been very helpful, the alien continued, its voice now a mixture of electronic tones and organic sounds. Your species' tendency to trust and protect survivors made this infiltration remarkably easy. Chen drew her sidearm, but the creature was already moving. It flowed across the chamber with impossible speed, its claws extended and aimed at her throat. She managed to fire 2 shots before it reached her, both striking center mass and doing absolutely nothing to slow its attack. Jackson's rifle burst took the creature in the side, spinning it away from Chen and into the bank of communications equipment. Sparks flew as claws raked through delicate electronics, destroying the transmitter array they had worked so hard to reach. Kill it, Chen shouted. But even as her team poured fire into the alien, she knew they were facing something far worse than a single infiltrator. This creature wasn't just physically superior to humans. It was capable of perfect mimicry, able to copy human appearance, mannerisms, and knowledge with flawless precision. If it could replicate Vasquez so perfectly, how many other survivors might be scattered throughout the facility? How many other human voices might be calling for help, leading rescue teams into carefully prepared traps? The alien absorbed their weapons' fire with only minor damage, its armor adapting to their energy output and distributing the impact across its entire body. But instead of counterattacking, it began to retreat toward an emergency exit. It's running, Davies called out, maintaining fire as the creature disappeared through an airlock. No, Chen realized with growing horror. It's reporting. Even as she spoke, her suit's sensors detected multiple new contacts throughout the facility. The aliens had been waiting, and the fake Vasquez had just told them exactly where to find Chen's team. Emergency extraction, Chen ordered, moving toward the chamber's primary exit. We need to reach the surface and signal the fleet. But as they reached the corridor beyond the communications chamber, they found their path blocked. 3 of the elongated alien killers stood between them and freedom, their glowing eyes focused with predatory intensity. Back the way we came, Chen called. But turning around only revealed 2 more creatures approaching from that direction. They were trapped in a carefully orchestrated ambush, surrounded by enemies that had spent 3 days learning every detail of human tactics and psychology. Chen looked at her 3 remaining soldiers and saw her own desperate realization reflected in their faces. They were going to die here. But before they did, they were going to make these creatures pay for every human life they had taken. Full auto, Chen ordered, switching her rifle to maximum output. Make every shot count, and take as many of them with us as you can. The aliens began to advance from both directions, moving with coordinated precision that spoke of hive mind intelligence. Their claws gleamed in the emergency lighting, and their mouths opened to reveal those terrible serrated teeth. Chen's first burst caught the lead creature's center mass, the enhanced energy output finally penetrating its adaptive armor. The alien staggered but didn't fall, greenish ichor streaming from the wound as it continued its approach. The battle that followed lasted less than 3 minutes but felt like hours. Human weapons technology, pushed to its absolute limits, faced alien biology that seemed to defy every law of physics. Chen understood. Her soldiers fought with desperate courage, their training and equipment allowing them to inflict casualties they had no right to achieve. When the gunfire finally stopped, 2 aliens lay dead, and 3 more showed significant damage. But Jackson was gone, his body torn apart by claws that could slice through titanium. Davies had lost his left arm below the elbow and was bleeding heavily despite his suit's medical systems. Only Kowalski remained uninjured, and that was because he had been knocked unconscious when an alien's blow sent him flying into a support beam. Chen herself bore claw marks across her chest plate, scratches that had come within millimeters of penetrating her armor and reaching her heart. She was alive through luck and reflexes, nothing more. The 3 surviving aliens regrouped at the far end of the corridor, apparently reassessing their approach. They had expected easy prey, and instead found determined resistance that had cost them casualties. Chen could see them communicating through some form of bioelectric field, their head crests flickering with patterns of light. "Sir," Davies called weakly, his good arm pressing against his severed limb to slow the bleeding. "My suit's medical sensors are detecting something. There are more humans alive in this facility." Chen looked at his display readout, seeing heat signatures scattered throughout the base. Dozens of them, all showing human physiological markers. For a moment, her heart leaped with hope, then she remembered Vasquez and the perfect mimicry the aliens were capable of. "Those aren't survivors," she said quietly. "They're wearing the faces of our dead." The implications hit her like a physical blow. The aliens hadn't just killed the base personnel. They had somehow replicated them, creating a small army of perfect human duplicates. When the backup force arrived, they would find what appeared to be grateful survivors ready to guide them to safety. Instead, they would be walking into a trap that would make the original massacre look like a minor skirmish. Chen had to warn them. Somehow, she had to get word to the approaching fleet that humanity's first contact with alien intelligence was a nightmare beyond their worst fears. She looked around the damaged communications chamber, searching for any equipment that might still function. There, buried under wreckage from the alien attack, she spotted the emergency beacon transmitter. It was designed for short-range distress signals, but if she could boost its output using the facility's main power grid, she might be able to reach orbit. The aliens had begun advancing again, apparently deciding that a direct assault was their best option. Chen made a desperate calculation and found only one option available. "Davies, can you walk?" The wounded soldier nodded, though his face was pale from blood loss. "For a while. Kowalski's unconscious but breathing. We're going to carry him and make for the main power distribution center. If I can overload the emergency beacon, we might be able to get a warning out." "Sir," Davies said quietly, "even if we reach the power center, it's a one-way trip. Overloading the grid will take out life support throughout the facility." Chen looked at the alien killers advancing toward them, then at the beacon transmitter in her hands. The choice was simple: die here fighting creatures that could perfectly mimic human beings, or die trying to prevent those same creatures from slaughtering another 800 humans. "Then we better make it count," she said. Together, they began the desperate run toward humanity's last chance for survival. The power distribution center lay 3 levels down from their current position, buried deep in the base's foundational structure, where massive fusion reactors provided energy for the entire facility. Chen half-carried, half-dragged the unconscious Kowalski, while Davies stumbled along beside her, his injured arm leaving a trail of blood that would make them easy to track. Behind them, the alien hunters moved with patient persistence. They no longer seemed concerned with speed. Apparently confident that their prey had nowhere left to run, Chen could hear them communicating in those strange harmonic frequencies, coordinating their pursuit with the methodical efficiency of a pack of predators. "Sir," Davies gasped, his voice weak from blood loss. "Motion sensors show more contacts converging on our position. They're coming from every access point." Chen checked her own tactical display and felt her heart sink. Red dots surrounded them on all sides, at least 20 distinct contacts, moving through the base's infrastructure with inhuman coordination. The aliens had called in everything they had for this final hunt. "How much farther to the power center?" she asked, adjusting Kowalski's weight across her shoulders. 200 meters, then down through the main conduit shaft," Davies replied. "But sir, there's something else. I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching from orbit. The backup fleet's arriving early." Chen's blood went cold. If the fleet was ahead of schedule, that meant they would arrive before she could get her warning transmitted. They would find what appeared to be a facility full of grateful survivors, all wearing familiar faces and speaking with trusted voices. "We have to move faster," she said, breaking into an awkward run despite Kowalski's dead weight. They reached the conduit shaft access just as the first alien rounded the corridor behind them. Chen had a brief glimpse of glowing eyes and extended claws before Davies' rifle fire forced the creature back into cover. The energy bursts lit up the cramped space like lightning, casting wild shadows on the metal walls. "Go," Davies shouted, providing covering fire while Chen wrestled with the shaft access controls. "I'll hold them here." The heavy door slid open, revealing a vertical tunnel lined with power cables and coolant pipes. Emergency lighting cast everything in deep red, and the air thrummed with the barely contained energy of the base's fusion systems. Chen rappelled down the shaft with Kowalski strapped to her back, her powered armor's servo systems compensating for the additional weight. Above her, Davies' rifle continued its steady barrage. But she could hear the distinct sound of alien claws on metal as their pursuers closed in. The power distribution center occupied a massive chamber at the base of the shaft, filled with control consoles, transformer arrays, and the thick cables that carried energy throughout the facility. At the center of it all sat the primary fusion reactor, its containment field glowing with barely restrained stellar fire. Chen laid Kowalski down behind a bank of control consoles and immediately went to work on the emergency beacon system. The transmitter was designed for short-range communication, but the base's power grid could provide enough energy to punch a signal through to orbit if she could figure out how to route it properly. Above her, Davies' rifle fire had stopped. Chen tried not to think about what that meant as she worked frantically with the beacon's circuitry. The aliens' voices echoed down the shaft, those horrible harmonic frequencies that somehow conveyed meaning without words. They were arguing about something, their communication taking on the tone of tactical disagreement. Then she heard Davies' voice calling down the shaft. "Commander Chen, I'm coming down. The corridor's clear." Chen's hands froze on the beacon controls. Davies' voice sounded perfectly normal, exactly as it should. But she had heard his rifle fall silent, and she knew with absolute certainty that the man who had covered her retreat was not coming down that shaft alive. "Acknowledged, Davies," she called back, while rapidly working to complete the beacon's power linkage. "What's your status up there?" "All hostiles neutralized," came the reply. "But I've got multiple contacts on long-range sensors. The backup fleet's beginning orbital insertion." Chen's blood ran cold. The Davies she knew would never call them contacts. He would call them friendlies, or the cavalry, or backup. The alien wearing his face was good, but not perfect. "Copy that," Chen said, putting false relief into her voice while she completed the final power connections. "Come on down. We need to get this beacon operational before the fleet lands." She could hear movement in the shaft above her, the sound of someone rappelling down the cables with military precision. In 30 seconds, she would be facing an alien that looked and sounded exactly like one of her soldiers. The beacon's power coupling engaged with a satisfying hum, and Chen quickly programmed her warning message into its memory core. The transmission would go out on all emergency frequencies the moment she activated it, carrying her warning to every ship in the approaching fleet. But first, she had to deal with her uninvited guest. The figure that dropped into the power center looked exactly like Sergeant Davies. Same face, same uniform, even the same bloodstains where his arm had been severed. But his left arm was whole and functional, and there was something in his eyes that had never been there before. "Commander," the Davies thing said, approaching with weapon lowered. "I managed to stop the bleeding and apply emergency repairs. My suit's medical system is keeping me functional." Chen nodded, keeping her own weapon casual but ready. "That's good news, Sergeant. We need to get this beacon operational and warn the fleet about what they're facing." "Absolutely," the alien agreed, moving closer to examine her work. "Though, I have to say, their tactical capabilities seem somewhat limited. We've managed to outfight them at every encounter." The creature's use of "we" instead of "I" was the final confirmation Chen needed. Davies would never have been so clinical about their desperate fight for survival. "You're right," Chen said, stepping back from the beacon controls. "We've definitely proven that humans are the superior species." The alien's reaction was immediate and telling. Its head snapped up, those borrowed eyes narrowing with suspicion. In its eagerness to agree with what it thought was human arrogance, it had revealed its true nature. Davies would have corrected her. The real Davies would have pointed out that they had barely survived each encounter, that they were outmatched in every category except determination. Chen triggered the beacon activation with one hand while drawing her sidearm with the other. The emergency transmitter came online with a piercing whine, broadcasting her recorded warning toward the approaching fleet. The Davies thing dropped its human pretense instantly, shifting into the elongated predator form she had seen before. Its claws extended as it lunged forward, moving with inhuman speed and precision. Chen's first shot took its center mass, the high-energy burst punching through its adaptive armor. Her second shot went wide as the creature's claws raked across her chest plate, sending sparks flying and overloading her suit's damage control systems. They grappled in the cramped space between control consoles. Human training and equipment, matched against alien strength and natural weapons. Chen managed to get her combat knife into play, the monomolecular edge finding gaps in her enemy's armor. The alien's claws punched through her chest plate, missing her heart by centimeters. Chen felt ribs crack and her lung puncture, but she kept fighting with the desperate fury of someone who knew she was humanity's last hope. Her knife found the creature's throat, sliding between armor plates to sever what might have been its equivalent of a carotid artery. Greenish ichor sprayed across the control consoles as the alien stumbled backward, its movements becoming uncoordinated. Chen emptied her sidearm into the creature's center mass, each shot driving it further back until it collapsed against the primary power coupling. As it died, its borrowed features melted away, revealing the predatory alien face beneath. Chen slumped against a console, feeling blood filling her punctured lung. Her suit's medical systems were working frantically, but the damage was extensive. She might have minutes before shock and blood loss finished what the alien had started, but the beacon was still transmitting. Her warning was racing toward orbit at light speed, carrying vital intelligence about humanity's new enemy. Then Kowalski stirred behind her, regaining consciousness with a groan of pain. "Commander?" he called weakly. "What happened? Where's Davies?" Chen turned toward him, relief flooding through her at hearing a genuinely human voice. But as Kowalski sat up, she saw that his eyes held that same cold intelligence she had learned to recognize. He wasn't Kowalski. He might never have been Kowalski. "Davies is dead," Chen said quietly, checking her weapon's charge level. "Just like you are." The false Kowalski's expression shifted into something that was definitely not human. "You cannot stop what is already in motion, human. Your backup fleet will land expecting to rescue survivors. Instead, they will find friends and comrades who will guide them to their deaths." "Maybe," Chen admitted, raising her sidearm. "But they'll also receive my warning. And when they do, they'll know exactly what you are." She fired her remaining shots into the creature, watching it collapse as its mimicry failed. Around her, the power center hummed with barely controlled energy, and her emergency beacon continued its desperate transmission. Chen's suit informed her that she had lost too much blood, that her injuries were beyond its ability to treat. She was dying, alone in the depths of an alien-infested facility, with no backup and no hope of rescue. But humanity would survive. Her warning would reach the fleet, and they would be prepared for what they faced. The alien strategy of infiltration and mimicry would fail when confronted by humans who knew what to look for. She thought about the 800 people who had died in this facility, about families and friends who would never see each other again. Their deaths had not been meaningless if they served as a warning to prevent future massacres. As her vision began to fade, Chen heard new sounds echoing through the facility. Explosions, weapons fire, and voices calling out tactical instructions. The backup force had arrived, and they were fighting. Her beacon had done its job. They knew. Chen's last conscious thought was of satisfaction. Humanity had faced its first contact with hostile alien intelligence and learned a valuable lesson. Never trust a friendly face when everyone should be dead. Above her, the battle for forward operating base Meridian raged on, but this time, it would be a fair fight. The aliens had lost their element of surprise, and humans fighting with full knowledge of their enemy were a very different opponent than unsuspecting victims. 6 months later, Admiral Sarah Vega stood in the rebuilt command center of what was now called Memorial Base Meridian. The facility had been completely reconstructed, with new defensive systems designed specifically to counter the shape-shifting abilities of the species now designated as Theta Draconis hostiles. The tactical briefing room displayed holographic representations of the alien creatures, showing their true forms alongside examples of their mimicry capabilities. Every soldier in the Colonial Defense Force now underwent training to recognize and counter shapeshifter infiltration. Commander Chen's warning saved over 3,000 lives, Admiral Vega told the assembled officers. The backup fleet arrived prepared for infiltration tactics and was able to identify and eliminate the alien duplicates before they could spring their trap. The battle had been brutal but decisive. Faced with humans who knew their tactics, the Theta Draconis forces had been systematically hunted down and destroyed. Not a single alien had escaped to report back to their fleet. However, the Admiral continued, long-range sensors have detected additional Theta Draconis fleets moving toward our outer colonies. They know we've discovered their presence, and they're adapting their strategy accordingly. A new hologram appeared, showing projected fleet movements and estimated arrival times. The war that had begun with the massacre at Forward Operating Base Meridian was just getting started. Intelligence believes they may have infiltrated other human worlds before we learn to detect them, Admiral Vega said grimly. Every colony, every ship, every person we encounter must be verified using the Chen protocols before they can be trusted. The Chen protocols, named after the commander who had died to establish them, were a comprehensive series of tests designed to identify shapeshifter infiltrators. Voice stress analysis, retinal scanning, behavioral assessment, and physical tests that no alien mimic could perfectly replicate. The enemy made one critical mistake, the Admiral concluded. They underestimated human adaptability. They thought killing us would be easy because they could wear our faces and speak with our voices. But wearing the mask doesn't make you the person underneath it. As the briefing ended and the officers dispersed to their commands, Admiral Vega remained alone with her thoughts. The war against the Theta Draconis would be long and difficult, fought against an enemy that could perfectly mimic human appearance but would never understand human nature. They could copy faces, voices, and mannerisms, but they couldn't replicate the bonds of loyalty, courage, and sacrifice that defined humanity at its best. They would never understand why a dying soldier would choose to warn others rather than preserve herself. That was their weakness, and humanity would exploit it to its fullest extent. The message Chen had died transmitting had been more than a warning about alien infiltrators. It had been proof that humans would never surrender, never stop fighting, and never abandon each other to an enemy's mercy. When backup finally landed at Forward Operating Base Meridian, they found every hostile was already gone except for the one standing over the bodies. But that one alien had learned a harsh lesson about human determination that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity's first contact with hostile alien intelligence had ended in massacre. But from that massacre had come knowledge, preparation, and an iron determination that would define every battle in the war to follow. The stars held dangers beyond human imagination, But they also held humans, and that made all the difference.